They say all is fair in love and war, but all is not fair. Why do the good die young? Why does evil prosper? In this series, love and war find their beginning.
You knock these buildings down, we'll hear all of us.
Birds literally dropped from the sky.
But scientists warn the worst is yet to come.
Only by knowing their past do we get clues as to how the story ends.
Every night on the TV news is like a nature hike through the book of Revelation.
This is only the beginning.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. How quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
As the country started to heal after the war, there continued to be attacks to divide it. But the hand of Providence was still working in the midst of this nation. There were consistent attempts to take it down the path of empire like many nations before her. And one of the most sinister was through the monetary supply. There were attempts at a central bank, an entity that would control the monetary supply of a nation through the 1800s, and success was on and off. Andrew Jackson played heavily in the role of a central bank in the United States. But something happened at the dawn of the 20th century. It was King Solomon who said, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." And there is a quote most often attributed to the House of Rothschild, the banking lenders of the old world, which says, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." It's the cynical golden rule that says he who has the gold makes the rules. Money began to be printed and loaned to this nation, putting it further and further in debt. And as World War I began, funds were needed to fund the war. Industrialization was taking off, and the Roaring '20s seemed like the party of prosperity that was never going to end. But greed, the love of money, is still the root of all evil. America has been so central in world events in the past 200 years because she was founded to uphold the principles of Jannah. The founding documents describe that. As long as she has maintained these principles, she has been safe. But a change is coming. As money was being loaned so easily, the military-industrial complex rose up. It was the perfect marriage. War needs money, and money needs war. And how do you distract the world while wars are started and sustained often under false pretenses? You market things to us that will supposedly make us happy. After the Second World War, the baby boomer generation lived amidst luxuries scarcely dreamed of in history. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, access to information and entertainment like never before. But debt to keep up with the Joneses is still debt. And this indebtedness is still slavery. President Kennedy saw the dangers. As soon as he signed the executive order that would have made the privately owned Federal Reserve not needed, and thus no interest payments on borrowed funds, it was only a matter of time before the love of money led men to do the most heinous thing of taking the life of the leader of the free world. His assassination forever silenced anyone else from challenging that power dynamic. Really, everything changed for the world in 1944 at Bretton Woods. It was there when world leaders decided to come up with a system to manage foreign exchange that would not put any country at a disadvantage. It was decided that the world's currencies couldn't be linked to gold, but they could be linked to the US dollar, which was linked to gold. And while the US held the gold, other countries held paper currency in US dollars. With more wars to fund, the Federal Reserve printed more and more fiat paper currency. Countries were concerned it would devalue the currency, so they began to seek to convert their dollars into gold. It increased so much that President Nixon decided to delink the US dollar from the gold standard. And once that happened, printing of fiat currency soared. Fiat currency means it's as good as we say it is. Today, the majority of the world's money is in US dollars. US debt has grown over 5,000% since the creation of the Federal Reserve. When the US got off the gold standard, money began to be loaned to pretty much anyone for anything, and the allure of the American dream was now an allure of the seduction of debt to have the appearance of wealth just like your neighbors. But with debt comes burden and stress, and the wealth gap began to grow between the rich and the poor like never before. Madison Avenue marketed everything to us, and look at what happened. With increasing debt came a need for both parents to work. Children were no longer being raised by their parents, but by daycare and a failing educational system. That educational system was not teaching young boys and girls how to think, but rather how to be mere reflectors of other men's thoughts. It told them that they came from monkeys and that life has no purpose. Values began to decline, and the sacreds of marriage, it slowly eroded. The social contract in America, that unwritten American dream that for decades had worked for so many, was no longer working. Drug use soared, gambling addiction took off, sex saturated the culture, pornography satisfied the lonely, and religion and spirituality lost their luster. And it's at this moment, when the church loses its power, it turns to power. When the church loses its power, it turns to those in power. And when the church loses its power from above, it turns to a power from beneath. With society unmoored and tension rising, the religious right saw that they were losing influence. They rejected the voice of the Lamb 200 years ago, so it shouldn't be any surprise that they have now, by and large, listened to the whispers of the dragon. But this mingling of church and state, even in free America, was predicted. The prophecies foretold that the professed friends of Jesus would become his enemies. This nation was to be a safe haven for freedom of conscience. Like a plant, she grew up slowly, like a lamb with two horns. But what happens next? She speaks like a dragon, the very symbol of Lucifer. See, a nation speaks by her laws, the very principles that she operates on. The beauty of this nation was that it was supposed to protect its minority. Though the track record is bad, with how we have treated the Native Americans, the Japanese, Hispanics, countless minorities, and mostly African Americans. So how would the nation transform from a lamb to a dragon? You know, they say legend says dragons used to eat lambs in the old world. How could a nation go from being one who followed the principles of Yeshua to the dictates of Lucifer? A prophecy of Revelation chapter 13 foretells of a time when America would return to the spirit of intolerance and persecution of the empires and superpowers that came before her. Never forget, this country was to be the guardian of the Protestant spirit, the guardian of conscience in the lives of its citizens. But verse 17 of Revelation 13 says a change would come. And it says it like this: no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Two things you need to see in these words with this power that would arise. Number one, it controls the monetary system. But more than that, there's number two, a way to ensure no one can buy or sell without the approval of the empire. Do you see any fulfillment, potentially, of these things happening today? That same spirit that ripped this nation in half 150 years ago, hatred of others and prejudice, It's striving to gain the victory again in America. But let's talk about the mark of the beast. First, the beast is easy. Beasts are used to describe empires and kingdoms in history. So we talked about the rise of world empires already. But what is a mark? Cattle are branded, cars are branded, clothing is branded. A company's logo is its mark or its trademark. Does any kingdom or empire or power on earth today claim to have something that is their mark or brand signature in the realm of the spiritual war? Especially any entity that once was identified as a beast or empire in the prophecies. Technology may very likely have a role in the enforcement of the mark of the beast, but it's ultimately a spiritual allegiance issue. Will you and I follow Yeshua or Lucifer? Love or selfishness? That's the choice. As we go back in history, we see that Emperor Constantine knew that uniting a world so divided by religion and practice was nearly impossible. The Christian Revolution was a force to be reckoned with, but he knew this was the only way to maintain global dominance. So he is said to have converted from paganism to Christianity. He then established a weekly day of rest, not on the biblical day of rest, but on the pagan day of worship. It was good for the family, the environment, and the state of society. Priest Enright says it like this, and I quote, "It was the Holy Catholic Church that changed the day of rest from Saturday to Sunday, the first day of the week. And it not only compelled all to keep Sunday, but at the Council of Laodicea in AD 364, anathematized or condemned those who kept the Sabbath and urged all persons to labor on the seventh day under penalty of anathema." End quote. Since Saturday, the seventh day, not Sunday, is the day specified as the holiday of creation in Scripture, isn't it curious that non-Catholics, who claim to take their religion directly from the Bible and not from the church or tradition, observe Sunday instead of Saturday? The Chancellor of Cardinal Gibbons on October 28, 1895 stated these words, and I quote, "Of course the Catholic Church claims that the change of Sabbath to Sunday was her act, and the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power and authority in religious matters." It's her mark of authority. The Christian church today has no basis from Scripture for so many things they teach or do. And it is this lack of divine authority that has led them to lose their influence in society. But there are things going on behind the scenes that you need to know about. Do you notice anything unique about the current political climate? It's increasingly divided. It seems everything has become a political issue: race, wealth, healthcare, the environment, and the list goes on. And one could argue, based on the data, that the religious right is driving the agenda. After all, they were the deciding voice in the last election. I want to talk to you, though, about this prophecy of America eroding freedom of conscience and how it will be fulfilled. Many don't understand how in free America, morality could be legislated just like it was in the old world. The prophecies predict that America will abandon the secrets of her power, her lamb-like horns, and like Samson cutting off the secret of his power, America will see the sunset of a Protestant republic, and church and state will unite. This country will repudiate every principle of its Constitution as a Protestant and Republican government. But how will this happen? Enter Christian Reconstructionism. This is a belief guiding much of the religious right and politics today. This is what is driving them to get so heavily involved in politics, even though Yeshua was adamant that his kingdom was not of this world. They've been deceived into thinking that the only way to usher in the coming of Yeshua is through a conversion of the world, and if needed, by force. A big point of contention is that they have misunderstood spiritual Israel. This idea that anyone and everyone is being called today to walk in the light. That everyone is being called to be an heir of the promises and become a citizen of Jannah. Instead, they teach and believe that the country of Israel plays a role in prophecy, and this is why there is so much American and evangelical interest in the land of Palestine, and specifically Jerusalem. But Scripture does not teach this. This is where theories of a secret rapture have come in, when in reality they have no basis in Scripture. This is why so many who call themselves Christians don't have any interest in caring for the environment. Why would they? If they are on a march to usher in the end of all things and bring in a millennium of peace on the earth. You can read it for yourself, but here's my point. A deceived base of individuals in America are seeking to regain control and influence for an end game purpose. And I'm here to warn you and make this issue clear before it's too late. And they aren't alone. The Society of Jesus is still actively involved in a counter-reformation all these years later, and they nearly have everything in position to take global control once again. Abortion, immigration, gay marriage. These aren't the real issues where everything is trending. Yes, there is clear scriptural basis on how to consider these issues, but these aren't the end. They are a means to an end. And that end is legislating morality and the destruction of freedom of conscience in the United States of America. There's an expression, never let a good crisis go to waste. Author Chris Hedges describes it like this, and I quote, "The empowerment of the Christian fascists, they are what comes next. For decades, they have been organizing to take power. They have built infrastructures and organizations, including lobbying groups and schools and universities, as well as media platforms, to prepare. They have seeded their cadre into the political system. The left, meanwhile, has seen its institutions and organizations destroyed or corrupted by corporate power. The Christian fascists," he goes on to say, "as in all totalitarian movements, need a crisis, manufactured or real, in order to seize power. This crisis may be financial. It could be triggered by a catastrophic terrorist attack. Or it could be the result of societal breakdown from our climate emergency. The Christian fascists are poised to take advantage of the chaos or the perceived chaos." End quote. They are waiting for a crisis, and America must be taken to a breaking point, most likely by economic turmoil. And once she breaks, then we are told a time of trouble will begin. But what does that look like? Today, multitudes are being led to believe that desire is the highest law, that license is liberty, and that man is accountable only to himself. But in reality, anarchy is seeking to sweep away all law, not only divine, but human. And the centralizing of wealth and power, the vast combinations for the enriching of the few at the expense of the many, the combinations of the poorer classes for the defense of their interests and claims, the spirit of unrest and riot and bloodshed, the worldwide dissemination of the same teachings that led to the French Revolution, all are tending to involve the whole world in a struggle similar to that which convulsed France. And then you and I will see the prophecy fulfilled. To control the ability for someone to not be able to buy or sell, you need to first control the monetary system. And second, you need to have a surveillance and technological apparatus in place that would limit someone's ability to access their bank account, all linked to their biometric data, their fingerprints, facial recognition, whatever it is. Noam Chomsky recently commented on the book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. This was written by Shoshana Zuboff, which in his view best predicts and outlines the techno-surveillance system that has already begun to take hold in the US and beyond. Companies like Google and Amazon and others find novel ways to exert control over humankind. In the book, Zuboff lays bare the threats to 21st century society. A controlled hive of total connection that seduces with promises of total certainty for maximum profit at the expense of democracy, freedom, and our human future. Chomsky, commenting on this idea, says, and I quote, "The kind of model toward which society is moving is already illustrated to a substantial extent in China, where they have very heavy surveillance systems and what they call a social credit system. You get a certain number of points, and if you say jaywalk, violate a traffic rule, you lose points. If you help an old lady across the street, you gain points. And pretty soon all this gets internalized and your life is dedicated to making sure you follow the rules that are established. And this is going to expand enormously," he describes, "as we move into what's called the Internet of Things, meaning every device around you, your refrigerator, your toothbrush, your thermostat, and so on, is picking up information about what you're doing, predicting what you're going to do next, trying to control what you're going to do next, and advise you what to do next. As I see it, Lucifer is trying to become God, and his path forward is to obtain the three great powers of God: omniscience, knowing everything through mass data collection; omnipresence, the ability to see what's happening everywhere at once via wholesale surveillance; and last, omnipotence, the ultimate power to control someone's ability through the two previous apparatus to turn someone off if they don't align with the new laws of society. And yet we're told the Guardians have been tasked with holding back this dystopian world control and calamity until everyone clearly understands the issues at stake. But when they get to signal to let go, there will be such a scene of strife that no pen can picture. Are we ready for that? Are you ready for that? I hope you're seeing these issues in the controversy so clearly that you can make a decision on whose side you want to be on before it's too late. Now, having said all of that, what I need to tell you next is about the coming invasion.